The Gospel of John records multiple I am statements from Jesus. These statements are metaphors revealing who he is. They show us both his humanity and his divinity. Every I am statement demands a response from those who hear it. Even today, followers of Jesus must respond to his words. When Jesus says, I am, we must ask, am I?
Well, good morning, South Lansing Christian Church. I'm so glad you're here. It's good to be with you. I'm Walter. I'm one of the ministers here on staff, and we are in the middle of this series called I Am. We're looking at these statements that Jesus made in the Gospel of John, 7 statements where he said things like, I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. And when Jesus made these kinds of statements, people responded, but they reacted. And so the Pharisees, they clapped back at him and they said, okay, you claim to be the light of the world. Under whose authority do you say these things? And so in the Gospels, every time Jesus makes one of these statements, they draw out a response. But for us, our response should be less of a reaction and more of a asking ourselves, am I? When Jesus says, I am the bread of the bread of life, we should ask ourselves, am I hungry? When Jesus says, am I the light of the world, or I am the light of the world, we ask ourselves, am I walking in that light? That's what we talked about last week. Today we're going to look at another one of Jesus' statements. It's found in John chapter 10, so you can flip on over there. As you flip over, have you ever walked into a room and totally forgotten why you were there? Yeah, okay, I'm not the only one, right? You end up in this room and you got your keys out and your coat's on and you just stand there scratching your head thinking, why did I come in here? So Jennifer, our church administrator, talks about this. She made a statement one day of going through too many doors. She went through too many doors and she forgot what she was going to say. And that got me thinking about that, and I don't know if you knew this or not, but there's a phenomenon that's been studied, according to the Scientific American, it's called the doorway effect. Yeah, it's a pretty good name. The doorway effect, there's something about walking through a door that causes your mind to just reset a little bit. And so in this study, this university grabbed a bunch of people and they gave them items to carry. This all happened in a virtual reality for whatever reason. So, you can imagine them with like the gloves on and the eyepiece. But the participants are given a box and then something goes in the box. Some of the participants go through a door and some stay in the room. Those who walk through a doorway, even in a virtual environment, have trouble recalling what's in the box. And even if those people walk into through a doorway into another room and then walk back into the original room, they still score lower on recall assessments than those who just stayed in the room the whole time. Isn't science fascinating? Isn't the way that God designed our minds fascinating too? The mere fact of passing through a doorway changes how our minds work. It changes many other things too. Walking through a door changes things. And we're going to talk about doors. Jesus talks about a particular door this morning in John chapter 10. But whether it's a gate or a door or something else, it changes things. Think about, it's spring right now, but just a month or so ago, before the time change, if you were outside on a snowy evening, and before you walk through the front door of your house, it's cold, it's dark, and then you pass through that doorway, and now it's warm inside, and you're home, and things are lit up, and they're glowing, and it's good. For me, when I was a kid, walking through the door of my school building, it changed me, man. It did. Outside, I was a normal, I don't know if I would say well-adjusted, but I was a kind of normal kid. But go into the door of the school, walk through that doorway, and I just became reserved and withdrawn, and I didn't want to be in that place. I didn't want to be around these people. The bell rings, and Walter runs out the front door of the school, and man, I'm a different person again. Walking through a doorway changes things. It can change our mood, it can change our circumstances, and it can even change our status. Now, in John chapter 10, Jesus talked about this door, this gate. In fact, he talks about being the gate, the doorway for the sheep. And that's a pretty significant statement we're going to unpack today. But I want you to know this. As Jesus talks about all this, he uses some metaphors, some imagery that might not be all that familiar to those of us in this room or joining online, because I don't see any shepherds here. I don't see anyone that I know who has sheep. And so some of these things Jesus says here, we have to stop and ask ourselves, what is he talking about? What is he trying to communicate? And then we take a step further and then start applying it to our lives. For this morning, Jesus is going to talk about three specific things: sheep, a shepherd, and this doorway, this gate. And so pay attention as he talks about all of those. He's painting a picture of what the kingdom of God looks like, but he's not necessarily drawing one straight story all the way from point A to point B. And in fact, there's so much material in chapter 10 that we're going to talk about Jesus' statement, I am the door, today. And then next week we're going to be back here and we'll talk about his statement, I am the good shepherd. Here's what I want you to know. You may pass through many doorways and even a few gates in your life, but there is exactly one door that leads to God. John chapter 10, verse 1. I tell you the truth, anyone who sneaks over the wall of the sheepfold rather than going through the gate must surely be a thief and a robber. But the one who enters through the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. All right, I want to pause real quick and talk about this imagery, because again, we're not, ancient Near Eastern shepherding people, and Jesus talks about this. And when I think of shepherds and their sheep, I think of King David leading his sheep and writing Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures, right? He leads me beside still waters. I think of that, like a shepherd boy out on the hills with his sheep. I think of the night that Jesus was born in Bethlehem, and that night there were shepherds out in the fields keeping watch over their sheep. And so that's what I think of when I think of sheep and shepherding in Bible times. I don't necessarily think of this sheep in a pen, which seems like it's what Jesus is talking about. And that raises an important point, again, about how we understand and interpret the Bible, because we often come at it with our own ideas and our own concepts and our own assumptions, but we have to take a step back and ask, what did this mean to the people who first heard it? One way to put this, and don't shout me out of church for this statement, but one way to put this is this. The Bible was written for us, but it was not written to us. Okay, and again, before we get too bent out of shape about this, God absolutely intended for this to be his special revelation given to us so that we can read and we can learn about Jesus, right? It's been passed down from generation to generation. But the letters, the writings in our scriptures were originally written to a specific intended audience. Paul writes to the church in Thessalonica. Paul writes to his buddy Philemon. John writes to some people and he says, these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. This idea, the Bible was written for us, but not to us. It's not my original idea. But in a letter that you write to someone, you've got shared language. You've got shared experiences. You've got things that you talk about, and you can just assume some of these things without spelling them out. And so if I was writing a text to my wife, I wouldn't say something like, hey, Jamie, when you arrive at my house, make sure you unlock the front door. The front door is the one where it's on the southeast side of the house. You walk up 3 steps, stand on the porch, and it's got like a deadbolt and a door handle, and it's black, by the way. Make sure when you come to my house, you unlock that door. That'd be ridiculous, right? Jamie lives in our house, and she knows what I'm talking about when I say, hey, can you unlock the front door when you come home? The Bible was written for us, not written to us. And so for the first recipients of John's gospel, they understand this sheep and this shepherding thing, and they immediately would have known that for some families would keep their sheep at night in a sheepfold. And it generally wasn't just one flock. It could be multiple flocks in the same sheepfold, and that in the morning, their hired shepherd or whoever was keeping the gate would open up the gate, and then the family would walk out and they would call their sheep, and just their sheep would come out of that sheepfold because the sheep knew their shepherd. Now next week, again, we're going to be talking about John chapter 10 a little bit farther, and we're going to see Jesus' statement where he says, I am the good shepherd, and then we'll have to ask ourselves, are we good sheep? And apparently one part of being a good sheep is to know your shepherd's voice and to follow him. But back to his illustrations here at the beginning of John chapter 10. Jesus' audience understood the illustration, like they understood the background for the illustration. They didn't necessarily always understand what he was trying to say. Verse 3, the gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep recognize his voice, and they come to him. And he calls his own sheep by name, and he leads them out. After he has gathered his own flock, he walks ahead of them, and they follow him because they know his voice. And they won't follow a stranger. They will run from him because they don't know his voice. Like I said, sheep can tell people apart. And in fact, you've probably heard that, sheep are dumb. That's kind of a common saying that we have in church. But honestly, sheep are just herd animals, and their instincts drive them to behave in a certain way. And from what I understand, the tests that have been done on their actual cognitive ability, sheep are a pretty intelligent animal. And they can tell people apart, and they know I should follow this shepherd or I shouldn't follow this imposter. It kind of looks like this. I have a video for you this morning.
One more time.
Oh, one is.
Louder!
Tika, 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 tika! Tika, 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 tika! Tika, tika! Tika, 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 tika! Ayoko!
Look at them, look at them.
That's amazing.
Isn't that amazing?
They are coming.
You scared them.
Yeah, Eunice made him go away.
Oh my God.
Was that cool or what?
Yeah.
You will never have the same again.
All right, isn't that amazing? Sheep know their shepherd. Ignore the fact that I'm pretty sure was Dwight Schrute up there as the farmer, but look, sheep know their shepherd. They know the voice that they're supposed to be following. Now, Jesus continues on here, and he says this. Those who heard Jesus use this illustration didn't understand what he meant. Okay, so they understand sheep culture. They know this is their life. They still aren't quite picking up on what Jesus had to say. In verse 7, so he explained it to them. I tell you the truth, I am the gate for the sheep. I am the gate for the sheep. He continues on here in verse 8. All who came before me were thieves and robbers, but the true sheep did not listen to them. Yes, I am the gate. Those who come in through me will be saved. They will come and go freely and find good pastures. The thief's purpose is to steal and kill and destroy. My purpose is to give them a rich and satisfying life. When I read Jesus' words in this passage, I start to get a picture of what he's talking about. This sheepfold, this corral where the sheep can come in, and at night they can have safety. They'll be in with the flock. Predators can't reach them there. And then during the day they can walk out and they can find some green pastures and they can find water. And so it's both this safety and sustenance, this provision. Any sheep that refuse to go through the gate, though, they're going to be left out in the darkness at night. And they're going to be left at the mercy of predators. Any sheep that refuse to go out of the gate in the morning would be hungry and thirsty in the sheepfold. There was one way for this life and one way for this sustenance, this provision. It was through that gate. And so in these verses, Jesus is claiming to be that. He's calling us his sheep, and he's claiming to be that door, that one way that leads to life. It's a claim of exclusivity. It's a claim of, divinity. Because if there's one gate that leads to life and only one gate, that's because there's only one way to God. And the question every single one of us is going to have to ask at one time or another in our life is, am I entering through the gate? Am I entering through the gate? Now, on the family farm that I grew up on, we didn't have sheep, but we had a bunch of animals on pasture, mostly cows and horses, and we had a few different pastures. During the winter, the fall and the winter, we'd have all of our animals at our house in Michigan, and there we could keep an eye on them and make sure that they were getting the attention that they needed in the cold months. But in the summer, we would take them to our pasture in Indiana. It was basically animal paradise. It was dozens of acres of alfalfa and hay, and there was a pond there they could drink out of and get into if they wanted, and there was shade for them to be under, and it was an amazing place. There's only one problem, though, and that was getting the animals from our house to Indiana, to Hoosier Hill pasture. Because for all of the good of that amazing pasture in Indiana, there was one and only one way to get there, and that was through the door of the stock trailer. And believe me, animals don't love riding in trailers. So every year we would in spring, we would gather the cows that we wanted to take, most of them, and a couple of the less than healthy horses, and we'd get them all corralled up and pushed forward in smaller and smaller areas, and eventually one of the big bulls would get real close to the trailer and just like snort and sniff, and I don't know if you've ever tried to move a 2,500-pound animal. It doesn't always go so well. And so every year, man, those animals would turn and want to jump over and crush a gate or run through the fence or head back, even though on the other side of this trailer was this animal paradise. Even though all winter long we'd seen to their every need, even though we had their best interest in mind, all they wanted to do was turn around and not go through the gate of that trailer. Even though if they would step into the trailer, they didn't even have to do any effort. We'd take them on a free ride right to the pasture. But every year, man, they would turn around and they would want to run away. Every other way led back to a worn-out pasture, a dirty cattle lot, a dead end. But those animals were so resistant. Can't you and I be just like that sometimes? God has very clearly told us the way that we need to go. He has our best interest in mind. He's prepared a paradise for us. Jesus has already done all of this work on our behalf, and all we need to do is enter through that one gate. That one gate. But it seems like all we want to do is go our own way, do our own thing, and pursue what we think will give us life. In his book, What's Wrong with Religion, the author Skye Jethani talks about this phenomenon. He says that all people are religious, whether they think so or not. And that's because religion is this response to a world of chaos and danger. And when we're confronted with chaos and danger, we experience fear, and then we want to control things. And so this religion is this fear and control routine. And so we try to control our circumstances and maybe achieve some security through the American dream, or we try to control our relationships and find our meaning in another person, or we even try to control God and bend him to our will in our prayers. And again, that's what religion is. It's this human response to fear. We attempt to assert control through prayer, through rituals, through disciplines, through a list of do's and do-nots. And because of that, many people have this assumption that all of these religions, they start at various places, but they end up at the same place. They think that, eventually, whether you're Christian or Buddhist or whoever, you'll end up at some kind of undefined afterlife with some kind of deity and, or cosmic awareness, and everything will be good for you. And that looks like this. This is what it looks like this mountain, where we all start at different places on the bottom, whatever religion you are, and then we all are working our way to the same place. That's the common idea in society. But what this author, what Jethani asserts is that in fact, it's very much the opposite. All religions start at this feeling of fear and wanting to control things, and then we end up at very different places, flip the mountain upside down, right? And we go different directions. And so some religions start at the same place with fear and control, and they go a path of peace. Some go a path of violence. Some put their trust in a deity, and some just put their trust in reason. And these are not the same destinations, and they won't end up with us all in the same place. That's the problem with religion. Religion is not enough. On its own, religion will never take you where you want to go. All the rituals, all the routines, all the disciplines, all the rules, these things are not enough. And that's why Jesus offers something very different here. He says, I am the gate for the sheep. And then he says, my purpose is to give them a rich and satisfying life. I love how the NIV puts it. I have come that they may have life, and life to the full. Life that's experienced in the fullness of God's love, life that's experienced understanding our purpose as His created beings, as His image bearers here in this world, given a mission. Jesus has come that we may have life, but that life can only be found in one place. Through the person and work of Jesus Christ, through entering through this one gate. And I know that many of us in this room, many of us tuned in online, have found that gate, and we've walked through it. But I know that's not the case for everyone here. And so I wonder, have you found that gate? Have you entered through that door? Or have you been trying to find life in some other way, some other way that's just not quite panning out? Have you been looking for life in the things of this world, in money and possessions? Jesus elsewhere talks about that. He says, don't store up that stuff here in this world. Thieves can break in and steal. Moth and rust, wealth degrades. We know this, don't we? We know this. How many of us have spent time thinking about something exciting we're going to buy? Some big new purchase, whatever it is for you. You've been thinking about it, dreaming about it, and then you go and you pay your hard-earned cash and you get it home, and quickly the joy, the quote-unquote joy, dissipates, right? You get used to it. It just becomes another wicket in your closet. How many of us have felt the satisfaction of a growing bank account and looking at, that saving that we've been doing, it's paying off, man, or the investments that we've made, they're going up and it's looking good, and then, we realize, as good as that number looks, it's not enough. It's never enough. Where have you been looking for life? Has it been in the things of this world? Has it been in something else? Have you been trying to find God in some other way? In some other religion? Some other philosophy of that world? Maybe it's the apparent peace of the Buddhists, or mystery and fascination with some other religion. Maybe it's just pure reason and philosophy and higher levels of thinking. If you've been there, you know that stuff is just as empty as everything else. Just an attempt to paste over this void, an attempt to find life in something that's not truly life-giving. Jesus is the only way to life. He's the only way to God. In fact, he says, if you flip on over a couple pages to John chapter 14, verse 6, he says this very clearly. Jesus told him, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one can come to the Father except through me. And Jesus' disciples heard this, and they began to spread that message. And so after Jesus ascended back into heaven, a couple more pages over, in Acts chapter 4, they stand up and they say this, Acts 4, verse 12. They say, there is salvation in no one else. God has given no other name under heaven by which we must be saved. If you have never called on the name of Jesus, if you've never taken a step through that gate, today could be that day. Today could be the day when you place your faith in the only God of the entire universe who has already done this work on your behalf, and He's just waiting for you to show up and accept what He's done for you. Today is the day when you can find life and peace and hope, redemption and purpose, but there is only one way. There's only one gate. And so if God has been working on your heart and if he's been asking you to repent, don't let another day go by. Let you and me have a conversation after church, or find one of our elders or one of our prayer team and have a conversation. Talk with them about what steps you can take and how you can place your faith in Jesus. Because there is only one way to God. Now, all this talk of religion versus life might sound a little confusing to you at first. You might be sitting there thinking, isn't Christianity a religion? And to that I'd say, no, it's not. Because those of us who've entered through that gate, who've come to place our faith and hope in Jesus Christ, we know that our faith is not a religion. This is life, man. Outsiders might try to classify it as a religion, but we know it's life both now and in the future. It's life indivisible. There's no sacred, secular divide. There's no supernatural, natural world. It's all one. We're not the church, and then we go out and we're just people. We are the church gathered today, and then we go out and we are the church scattered on a mission. And so when you are standing in line at Meijer for the grocery store, and you're standing there, you are there as a representative of Jesus. And when you spend all day on your couch, I was super lazy yesterday and spent most of the day on the couch. When you spend all day on your couch, you are a person created in the image of God, designed to reflect glory back to your Creator. And when you enter your workplace, you go in as a person of peace to a place where there may not be peace. And when you go through the doors of your school, you go in as Jesus' representative and you are on a mission. Sisters and brothers, if you've placed your faith and hope in Jesus, if you've entered through that gate, this is not your religion. This is your reality. And if you've not yet made that decision, there is only one gate. There is only one way to God. And we hope that you take a step through it today. Will you join me in prayer? Jesus, we're thankful again for your words, for the truth that we find. We're thankful for the life that you offer, for the redemption you offer, for your sacrifice already made on our behalf. I thank you for my sisters and brothers in this room who already know you, and I pray that more will, even today, take a step through that gate, that they would choose to place their faith and their hope in you and choose to be baptized and live this new life. Father, I pray that we as the church, as we go out from this place, that we would understand that we are commissioned, that we are sent out to be your people, and that this is just a building that we meet in, but we are the church. I pray that you would enable us to see other people that need to find their way back to you and help them to find their way. God, impress upon us the urgency of our mission. And it's in your name, Jesus, we pray these things. Amen. All right, at this time in our service, we get a chance to respond to God, and we do that here in a couple different ways. So we'll be on our feet, we'll be singing together, and this is a way that we just tell God, we worship him, and we just thank him for what he's done for us in Jesus, and tell him how awesome he is. It's one of those things that we do every week. As we worship together and sing, we'll have tables around the room where you can gather with us and participate in communion. This is an ancient practice that goes back thousands of years at this point, and it reminds us of Jesus' sacrifice made on our behalf. The bread there represents Jesus' body that was broken for us. The juice represents his blood that was shed on our behalf. And so we gather together as brothers and sisters here in this room, but we gather as the church universal. It's gathering today around the world, but also stretches backward into history and forward into eternity. And we remember and celebrate what Jesus has done for us. And so we invite you to come and worship with us. Will you stand on your feet and join us?